What would you do if your children, your own flesh and blood, forgot your birthday? Not because they were sick, not because they were trapped in a war zone, but because they simply didn't care. It was the kind of silence that hurt more than words ever could. Sylvia sat alone at the head of her long mahogany dining table, the one she had polished and prepared with a trembling hope all week. She had even arranged the same vanilla rose centerpiece her kids used to admire when they were younger, back when they still looked at her with unfiltered love instead of distracted indifference. The cake sat untouched, the candles unlit. Her phone lay face up beside the plate, silent. Not even a text. She stared at it, waited, refused to believe. But midnight came like a cold slap, and with it, an awakening. You raise children with the hope they'll become better versions of you, more loving, more aware, more grateful. But what happens when all they become is distant successful, yes, polished definitely, but hollow, where it counted most. 38 years of motherhood, and not a single call. Her eldest Adrian always the golden boy. Now a corporate star who hadn't visited in months, too busy. He claimed jetting across the globe while ignoring the woman who once stayed up 3 nights straight when he had the flu at 5. The middle child, Justine, a lawyer wrapped in sharp words and sharper silences, and the youngest Noah, the sensitive soul who'd turned cold after his wife whispered enough poison to corrode his loyalty. They used to call her Mama Bear. Now she was just Sylvia. It wasn't always like this. There were years when they'd plan elaborate surprises, handwritten cards, messy cupcakes off-key singing that filled her heart. But slowly, the decay crept in, not dramatic, not sudden. Just subtle neglect, like dust collecting in corners no one bothered to clean anymore. Have your children ever made you feel replaceable? That night, as the wind knocked softly against her windows, Sylvia felt something inside her shift. Not break. Shift. A quiet, seething resolve that rose up from her gut and whispered, "Enough." She got up from the table, took the cake into the kitchen, and sliced a small piece for herself. She didn't cry. Not yet. She chewed slowly, letting the sweetness coat her tongue, while bitterness curled around her chest. They think I'll always be here, she thought. They think love is unconditional. But they've confused love with servitude, with silence, with surrender. And so the next morning, as dawn crept in and her phone remained heartbreakingly quiet, Sylvia, dressed in navy slacks and her best silk blouse, the one Adrian had given her 5 birthdays ago, when he still pretended to care. She drove to the attorney's office without telling a soul. The will was straightforward, everything divided evenly. Her house, her savings, the art collection, even the jewelry she kept locked away, sentimental and financial legacies, meant for the children who no longer saw her as a person. Sylvia looked at the line bearing Adrian's name, then Justine's, then Noah's, and with every stroke of her pen she erased them. Instead, she wrote in 3 new names. Quiet people who had shown her kindness without obligation, her nurse friend who checked in every week, her old neighbor who mowed her lawn without being asked, and her book club partner who brought her flowers when no one else remembered Mother's Day. Each name she wrote felt like a small rebellion. Each signature was a declaration. Let them feel the absence like I have, she thought. Let them taste the hollow. Some women scream when they're hurt, some cry. But the ones who have been hurt for too long, they go quiet. They plan. And when they finally act, it's surgical, icy, precise. You think you're safe because she doesn't yell, because she still answers your calls when you remember to make them, because she still shows up to Christmas dinners and pretends the burning in her chest is just heartburn. But she's watching. And one day she'll stop giving. That day won't come with fireworks, just silence. Cold, absolute silence. And that silence will cost you everything. The day after Sylvia rewrote her will, the sky was deceptively beautiful, pale blue, with feathery clouds, as if the universe itself didn't dare mourn the choices she'd made. But inside her, a quiet storm. She returned home to her 2-story craftsman house, the one she had raised them in, loved them in, nearly died in. Every corner whispered memories. Adrian's muddy footprints on the porch from when he brought home a stray dog. Justine's cello echoes still faint in the study. Noah's drawings on the back of kitchen menus still tucked into drawers she hadn't touched in years. It wasn't the memories that hurt. It was the realization that they were frozen, trapped in amber, never to be updated, never evolving. Her children had moved on and left her behind. For weeks after she told no one, not even her book club friend Elaine, who would have clutched her hand with scandalized glee. Sylvia simply waited, Not with hope that had died somewhere between slice number 3 and the cold silence of dawn, but with grim clarity. She didn't need them to apologize. She wanted them to notice. But they didn't. Adrian sent a group email about a real estate opportunity in Florida. Might be smart to sell the house soon, Mom. Downsizing could be good for you. He signed it, "Take care. No happy belated. No acknowledgement." Justine forwarded her an article on brain health for aging women. No note, just a hyperlink, no warmth, just obligation disguised as concern. And Noah sweet broken. Noah sent a voice memo. His wife's voice chirped in the background about dinner reservations. He didn't even realize his message had cut off halfway through a sentence. Have you ever screamed so loudly inside that your bones vibrate, but your face stays calm? That was Sylvia now, smiling at strangers, baking for neighbors, going about her routines with military precision. But behind her eyes, a war zone. The quiet mother was gone. In her place stood something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to prove. The real unraveling began on a Sunday. Elaine, her friend from book club, invited her to brunch with a few acquaintances, widows and wild women she'd called them, laughing. Sylvia went half curious, half numb. They sat in the garden of an old Victorian home, sipping Prosecco and peeling back layers of conversation like old wallpaper. One of the women, a firecracker named Judith with gray streaks and lipstick that dared you to underestimate her, leaned in and asked, "Do your kids treat you like a ghost too, or is that just me?" Sylvia didn't answer at first, but something in her cracked. "I think I raised narcissists," she said flatly. "Or maybe I just made it too easy for them to forget me." The table went still. Then came the laughter. Not mocking, understanding. Judith clinked her glass against Sylvia's. "We all did, sweetheart. We loved them so much we made ourselves invisible. Now they only see us when we're useful." That was the moment Sylvia decided never to feel guilty again. You don't owe anyone your life, not even the ones you gave it to. A mother gives and gives and gives. But when that love becomes expected instead of appreciated, when her pain becomes background noise, she becomes a shadow in her own story. But shadows know the truth. Weeks turned into 2 months, and then came Thanksgiving. Adrian texted a few days before asking if they could swing by late after their ski trip detour. Justine followed with a cryptic message. "Let's just keep it casual this year. No fuss." Noah didn't respond at all. They expected her to host, to cook, to make room, to endure. But this time when they arrived, bags in hand, voices too loud, eyes scanning for what was prepared for them, they found the house locked, lights off, a note taped to the door. "Out of town. Help yourselves to the silence you gave me. Love, the woman formerly known as Mom." They stood there stunned like children turned away from a candy store. Have you ever watched people panic when their source of comfort disappears? Adrian knocked. Justine called. Noah, finally alert, left a voicemail dripping in confusion and guilt. But Sylvia was 3 hours away, sipping wine on a sun-drenched patio, her phone turned off, her shoulders lighter than they'd been in years. For once, she didn't feel cruel. She felt clean. This wasn't revenge. This was a reset. You see, people only learn when they lose access, when the door closes not with rage, but with finality. And the woman who once sacrificed herself for their comfort, she had nothing left to lose except herself. And she wasn't losing that again. It took 3 weeks before Adrian finally showed up in person. Sylvia heard his luxury sedan before she saw it, the low purr of entitlement pulling into her driveway like it owned the pavement. She didn't rush to greet him. She stayed seated on her garden bench, trimming the dead leaves off her azaleas, pruning, as if it were a metaphor. And it was. He approached with that polished gait he'd mastered in corporate boardrooms, power disguised as apology. His sunglasses came off first, a peace offering, maybe revealing eyes that flickered with confusion, and something more vulnerable underneath fear. "Mom," he started, voice too smooth, too practiced. "Can we talk?" She didn't look up right away. She clipped one more leaf. "You drove a long way," she said finally. He smiled, half relieved. "You didn't answer my calls." Sylvia set the shears down slowly and turned her face to his. "No," she said, "I didn't." There are moments in a child's life when they realize their parent is no longer theirs, no longer bound by guilt or nostalgia. This was that moment for Adrian. You could see it in how his jaw tightened, in how he fumbled for what to say next. I think we've all been a little distant. Life gets busy." You felt that, didn't you? That blade wrapped in politeness. Life gets busy, the eternal excuse. The bandage slapped over bleeding disrespect. Sylvia stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked him dead in the eye. You remembered your wife's birthday last month. You flew to Italy for it. You posted about it, twice. Adrian blinked. Guilt flushed his face. That was different, Mom. No, it wasn't. Silence settled between them, sticky and sharp. He shifted, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. I brought you something. For your birthday. I know I'm late, but she didn't move to take it. You think you can fix absence with gifts? She asked, her voice low, almost curious. He hesitated. No, I just thought you'd want something. A gesture. Sylvia smiled then, a slow, devastating thing. I did want something, Adrian. I wanted your voice on the day I came into this world. Not a bracelet, not a box, just a moment of your attention. He looked down, defeated. The box dangled awkwardly in his hand. And now, he asked quietly. Now, she said, stepping closer. I want you to sit with what it feels like when someone you love stops waiting for you to remember them. You ever watched a grown man shrink? Not physically, spiritually. Like a child realizing his mother isn't made of endless forgiveness. Adrian left after 20 minutes. The box sat unopened on the porch. Sylvia didn't throw it out. She simply didn't care enough to bring it inside. A week later, Justine called. She didn't say hello. She said, you erased us from the will. Ah, there it was. Not how are you? Not I'm sorry. Just shock layered in arrogance, the assumption that Sylvia was bluffing. Yes, she replied, sipping tea by her window. Justine scoffed. You're being dramatic. Sylvia's tone didn't shift an inch. No, I was dramatic when I used to beg for your attention. This is math. I added up the love I gave and subtracted what I received. You were the remainder. You feel that the chill that's not cruelty. That's honesty after decades of sugar-coated pain. Justine launched into a monologue about responsibility, about family, about how Sylvia was alienating the people who matter most. But Sylvia had heard it all before, especially that last part. That's the thing she said when Justine finally stopped. You don't get to matter most in someone's life if you only show up for the reading of the will. Click. And as she set the phone down, Sylvia felt it not pride, not victory, peace. Noah didn't call at all. He sent a letter. Handwritten, slanted cursive, apologetic ink. It was the only thing that made her cry. He didn't justify. He didn't grovel. He simply wrote, I let other voices matter more than yours. And I'm sorry. I've been missing you for years. I just didn't know how to come back. Sometimes it's not the absence that hurts the most. It's realizing how long you settled for it. She wrote back, briefly, gently. Come for tea. No explanations. Just come as my son again. You see, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing who is still allowed to witness your soft parts after they've proven they can hold them without breaking them again. And one by one, the balance shifted. She didn't become cruel. She became clear. And when clarity comes after a lifetime of dimmed lights and false smiles, it's blinding. The tea with Noah happened on a quiet Thursday. No grand gestures, no dramatics. Just a mother and son sitting across from each other in the late afternoon sun, the kind that makes everything golden, even old wounds. He looked thinner, older, tired in the way men look when they've been pretending not to feel for too long. Sylvia didn't ask questions. She poured him chamomile and sliced warm banana bread. And Noah, who had once sat in that exact chair with scraped knees and chocolate-stained lips, looked at her like she was a stranger he'd wronged in a past life. I don't even know where to start, he whispered. You already did, she replied, nodding toward the letter he'd sent. Most people never get that far. There was a pause, the kind where truth could either bloom or die. I let Claire control how close I could be to you, he said eventually. She said you were manipulative, that you pit us against each other. Sylvia didn't flinch. She simply stirred her tea. And what did you believe? Noah looked down. His fingers trembled slightly around the ceramic cup. I believed it was easier to distance myself than to challenge her. I told myself you'd always be there, that I had time. You ever realize someone you love was a coward with good intentions? That was Noah. Not cruel, just weak. The boy who cried in her lap when lightning scared him had grown into a man who let the storm sit between them, never once reaching for her hand. But you weren't manipulative, he added, tears threatening the edge of his voice. You were just tired of being the only one trying. Sylvia felt something loosen in her chest, a knot that had lived there for a decade. People will always call a woman manipulative when she stops accepting crumbs, she said, especially if she's quiet while she does it. Noah's shoulders shook just once, and then he reached across the table and held her hand like he used to, fingers curled, needing comfort but offering it too. That moment wasn't a fix. It wasn't redemption. It was something more, rare recognition. Later that evening, she stood by the mirror brushing her hair, watching the silver strands catch the last light. And for the first time in years, she didn't look tired. She looked precise, grounded, like a woman who had learned to stop bleeding for people who only came around when they smelled inheritance. Have you ever seen what happens when a woman no longer fears being alone? She becomes dangerous, not with rage, but with clarity. She stops performing motherhood like a duty. She starts living it like a boundary. She learns that love without respect is just performance art for the ungrateful. Adrian tried again, sent Flowers voicemails, a carefully worded letter from his assistant, requesting a chance to talk things through. She ignored it. Justine sent a legal inquiry through her firm under the guise of ensuring transparency. The audacity made Sylvia laugh out loud. She framed the letter, hung it in the bathroom above the toilet. And when Christmas came, always her favorite holiday, always the one she made magical, even when money was tight, she didn't decorate the tree, didn't bake, didn't wait by the phone. Instead, she booked a 3-day cabin retreat with Elaine and Judith and 2 other women who had also been forgotten. They drank whiskey, played card games at midnight, wore silk robes and cackled like witches who'd burned their shame at the stake. Because you know what happens when you stop asking for love. You find it in unexpected places, in friendships that don't demand performance, in mornings that don't ache, in laughter that doesn't need to be earned, in yourself. By the new year, Sylvia had become someone new, or maybe just returned to someone buried beneath the ashes of duty. She read again, painted, took long drives with no destination. She stopped measuring her worth by how often her children remembered her. Somewhere along the way, she realized the cruelest betrayal wasn't the forgetting. It was how easily they assumed she'd never leave. But she had. Not from her house, not from their lives. From the role, the job, the unpaid, unthanked labor of being there while receiving nothing but silence in return. Let them sit with the absence. Let them feel the weight of what they never thought could disappear. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is walk away before she's begged to stay. And when they come knocking, not with apologies but expectations, she doesn't open the door. She doesn't even answer. Spring came, and with it the soft bloom of things reborn. The azaleas in Sylvia's garden flourished more than they had in years. Birds returned to the feeders she'd once neglected. She caught herself humming as she swept the porch one morning and paused, stunned. When was the last time she'd hummed without grief beneath the sound? There was no drama left now, no long voicemails to delete, no backhanded holiday invites, just space, quiet, sacred space. You ever feel what it's like to breathe without tension in your ribs? That's what her days felt like now, breathable. One afternoon in May, she received a letter from her lawyer. Routine paperwork, confirming the changes she'd made to her will were now filed final and protected. She held the envelope in her hands for a long time, not because she doubted it, but because this was it, the quiet signature that finalized her becoming. The woman who once gave everything without question had now chosen who was worthy of what she left behind. And it wasn't her children. You might think that's cruel, but ask yourself this: how many women do you know who give and give and give, and when they die are remembered not for who they were, but for what they provided? Sylvia refused to be a footnote in her own legacy. She wrote one last letter, a simple document she kept in her desk drawer, addressed to all 3 of them. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't bitter, it was truth carved in ink. You will not understand this now, but one day when someone you love forgets your voice, your smile, your birthday, you will. And I hope you remember me then. Not for what I gave, but for what I finally refused to give anymore. It was signed with her full name. Not Mom, not Mother. Sylvia Jean Hartley, the woman behind the role. And when the day comes, and it always does, when the house is sold and the belongings are boxed and her children stand in a sterile lawyer's office expecting their slice of her, they will feel the full weight of her absence, not just in dollars, but in truth. They will learn that love is not a birthright. It is a currency. And if you stop investing in it, you cannot demand its return. You cannot claim the warmth of a hearth you helped extinguish. Noah stayed. Not every day, not in a fairy tale way, but in the small, real moments. He brought her books, helped fix the shed, listened, said I love you without rushing out the door. He even cried once in the middle of planting herbs when she brushed soil from his cheek the way she used to when he was a boy. They never spoke again about the will, or the others. They didn't need to. Forgiveness when it's real is silent, rooted, earned. And Sylvia, she grew radiant in her solitude. There's a kind of power that comes not from vengeance, but from walking away and never looking back. Not slamming doors, not screaming your worth, just living it. Some women are forged in fire. others in silence. But the strongest, the most dangerous are made in the moment they decide they will never beg to be remembered again. So when you think of her, picture this: a woman in a white linen dress, barefoot in her garden, sipping strong tea as the sun rises over a life no longer lived for the approval of those who never truly saw her. She doesn't wait for calls. She doesn't flinch at silence. She doesn't need an audience to feel full, because she knows now the woman who knows her worth doesn't beg. She watches, then she rises.